Like I said, I'm Andrew Kraft. Thanks so much for being with us here. Like I said, we are in a new hour now, and we do want to focus our efforts in this hour on some more of these, especially international headlines. So right now we're going to be focusing on the Middle East. At the bottom of the hour, we'll be focusing on Europe and the war in Ukraine. We'll also be diving into some of these elections worldwide, especially there in our ally, Japan. Parliamentary elections really ushering in a bruising loss for the ruling party. We'll get into that a little bit later on. But let's show you this report by Fox's Gernal Scott about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip after numerous countries issuing a joint statement saying the condition needs to improve there in the enclave. Let's watch.
As fears of hunger in Gaza grow, countries are calling for an end to the war. In a joint statement Monday, 25 nations, including Britain and France, described recent deaths in the territory as, quote, horrifying.
The situation on the ground in Gaza is intolerable on so many levels.
According to the Gaza Health Ministry, at least 67 Palestinians were killed in the northern strip on Sunday as they attempted to access food from United Nations aid trucks.
We were waiting for flour because of hunger. We wanted to eat and drink. Suddenly the tanks came out surrounding us. They started shooting at us and we were unable to move.
The Israeli military says troops fired warning shots toward the crowd to remove a, quote, immediate threat, and said it, quote, certainly does not intentionally target humanitarian aid trucks. Humanitarian workers are warning that hundreds of people in Gaza could die from a scarcity of food. The World Food Program says nearly 1 in 3 people there are not eating for days at a time.
The situation here is absolutely dire. The situation in Gaza has never been this bad. They are desperately hungry.
Another growing concern among aid groups is Israel issuing new evacuation orders for parts of central Gaza, an area where ground troops rarely operate and many international organizations are located.
There's 2 million people in Gaza on the brink of famine. We need the humanitarian community to be allowed to do our jobs.
Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Gernal, thanks so much. So we want to bring into the conversation some of our friends and colleagues at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, including Hussain Abdul-Hussain. He joins me. Hussain, happy Monday. Got to talk about this. What is the humanitarian picture like right now in the Gaza Strip?
The situation is dire. We all agree on this. The Palestinians, the Israelis, the world. What some disagree on is who's responsible for it. And many would like to think that because Hamas is refusing to give up the mechanism of food distribution, that's causing a problem. Because Hamas thinks that they hold or they control the Gaza Strip through 2 tools. One of them is, of course, violence, and they've been beaten hard by Israel. And the other one is actually governing the Palestinians. And Hamas doesn't want to concede either. Now, like I said, they've been beaten militarily, but they're trying to hold on to the non-military part. And I think this is what's causing the problem. This is what's causing the backlog, the lack of distribution, and all the hunger that's going around in Gaza.
So this is a joint statement by 28 countries today. What do joint statements do? Why do they feel the need to do it now in the course of the war is my question.
Most of the time, it seems to me that these are feel-good statements. If we want the war to stop, any war is fought by 2 sides. It needs 2 to tango in a war. So Israel can stop, but Hamas can also stop. It's not like there's only one party responsible for this war. Now, the thing is, even if the shooting stops, even if both sides announce a ceasefire on the spot, the fact that the Israelis and Hamas are still in proximity to one another, this will still hold back the distribution of aid as it has to be. For distribution to flow, one of these sides will have to get out of the way of the other. So does Israel want to get out and let Hamas come back and organize the Gaza Strip, therefore govern the Gaza Strip? Or do you want Hamas to surrender and let the Israelis replace them by any other Palestinian authority or group or organization, or even the Israelis themselves. I'm not sure. So this is what we have, and unfortunately, the Hamas is not budging.
Okay, so the statement described as horrifying the recent deaths of over 800 Palestinians who were seeking aid. And that is according to the figures released both by the Gaza Health Ministry and the UN Human Rights Office, though Israel's foreign ministry rejecting that statement, saying it was, quote, disconnected from reality and sends the wrong message to Hamas. Israel accusing Hamas of prolonging the war by refusing to accept an Israeli-backed proposal for a temporary ceasefire and hostage release here. So over the weekend, and we've seen several of these headlines come out recently, the Gaza Health Ministry says Palestinians going to these specifically located and designated aid distribution sites have been killed, either shot by the IDF or, caught up in some type of stampede or crush during the melee of people running to get the aid here. I have to ask you this just straight up. Is Israel shooting point blank at some of these Palestinians, at some of these Gazans at these aid distribution sites, or is that coming from Gaza's health ministry? Do we have to take that with a grain of salt? What has Israel said about that?
Well, I think there's no central authority that's controlling everyone and everything. This is a war zone, and at any given moment, if you're standing at any distribution center, you might find yourself caught in a crossfire between the Israelis and Hamas. So this is the situation on the ground. I think Hamas, what they try to do is that they try to exploit these situations. Like I said, they want to have Gazans to continue feeding off of their hands. And to do that, it's not in their interest to see organizations really distributing food. So what the UN has suffered so far, the UN organizations have suffered, is that Hamas doesn't let them distribute the food. Hamas takes over trucks and Hamas does its own distribution. And this has been a huge issue. Now, there have been a few organizations that have been more successful than others, but still these usually operate not in all of Gaza, mainly in parts where the IDF has secured these zones. But if you go to the lawless parts of Gaza, I think this is where things become really nasty. Now, just to say, Gaza is not uniform. There are some parts that are doing fairly better than other parts.
Okay.
Granted that the situation is bad, but it's not uniform.
Okay, but I'm just trying to get to the bottom of whether Israel bears responsibility for some of these killings at these aid distribution sites. The Associated Press characterizes this joint statement by 28 countries as Israel's isolation is deepening here. But what has Israel said about how they're trying to keep order at these food sites?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for the Israelis, but
sure.
what I can say is that things have to be put in context. This situation is complicated. Neighborhoods are not the same. Not everyone is hungry. Not everyone. I mean, there are many people who are hungry. It's just so many factors, so many organizations, so many authorities. The Israelis are not running this smoothly all by themselves. Even their troops, when they're moving around in the Gaza Strip, they have to watch out for possible bombs or snipers or Hamas shooting at them.
Right.
So it's not as if they're, they have everything under control and they've decided, okay, you guys are not going to eat or have any food. Okay. So it's a war zone, and it's always hard to feed people in war zones.
Yeah. We have live pictures there. I believe this is in Tel Aviv in Israel right now. Take a look at that. Also, our vantage point there in southern Israel looking into the Gaza Strip. So, Hussain, we brought you on to discuss this piece that dropped over the weekend. Some great reporting in Axios by Barak Ravid and Mark Caputo. They report this, quote, as smoke and debris swirled over the Syrian presidential palace, the chatter in the West Wing grew louder that Benjamin Netanyahu is out of control. And we were on the air as we were listening to the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Shara, update and deliver an address to the Syrian people. This was footage of some of those very Israeli strikes in central Damascus here. So this is how they report this, Hussain. They have some of these sources, White House officials, telling them, quote, Bibi acted like a madman. He bombs everything all the time, according to one White House official, referring to Netanyahu by his nickname. He says, quote, this could undermine what Trump is trying to do. A second senior U.S. official also pointed to the shelling of a church in Gaza this week, which led President Trump to call Netanyahu and demand an explanation. That senior U.S. official told the reporters this, quote, the feeling is that every day there is something new. What the F? A third U.S. official said there's growing skepticism inside the Trump administration about Netanyahu, a sense that his trigger finger is too itchy and he's too disruptive. One official said this, quote, Netanyahu is sometimes like a child who just won't behave. Now, Netanyahu's spokesperson, Ziv Agman, did not respond to a request for comment there to Axios. Now, they say why it matters, saying 6 U.S. officials telling Axios that despite a U.S. brokered ceasefire that halted this week's escalation in Syria Friday, this week ended with the White House significantly more alarmed about Netanyahu and his regional policies. Hussain, what do you think about this report? Is there growing tension in the White House amongst Trump and Netanyahu about Netanyahu's designs, his strategy, his approach to the Middle East? According to their reporting, these Israeli strikes inside Damascus really took some people in Washington by surprise. Are they warranted?
Well, it doesn't make sense if it took them by surprise, because the strikes came a day or two after massacres have started. The government forces were massacring the Druze in the south. So if the White House was taken by surprise, that means the White House was not paying attention to what was going on inside of Syria. Now, I'm not trying to take sides here, but I think the strikes on Damascus were completely the right call. There was no other way to force these Islamists to stop their onslaught on the Druze without Israel flexing its muscles. Now, this said, remember that everything that's going on in Syria, the reason why after 40 years of the U.S. not talking to the Assads or the Assad regime, the reason why now we're investing in Syria and talking to Syrians is because of the Israeli military campaign that decapitated Hezbollah and caused the collapse of Assad and his replacement with Sharar. So all that we see now, the diplomacy that the United States is waging in.
All right, looks like, apologize there. We may have lost Hussain Abdul-Hussain with the FDE. We'll wait to see whether or not his shot comes back. But we do have these live vantage points there over the skyline in Tel Aviv, also there in southern Israel, looking into the Gaza Strip. And so we'll have to work on getting Hussain back. Let's keep with the Middle East, though, as we continue to follow this story that broke in Axios there by Mark Caputo and also by Barak Ravid. So the main quote from one of these White House officials was this, quote, Bibi acted like a madman. He bombs everything all the time. We have Hussain back. Hussain, thanks for being with us. We're at the whims of technology and Zoom, but we have you back here. If you would, finish what your thought was there.
Well, I'm not sure which part you guys got, but the point I was trying to make was that all of diplomacy that you see now in Syria and in Lebanon, the reason why we have a new regime that the United States is investing in is thanks to Israeli military operations. I mean, all of this has been on the back of Israel defending its own existence and therefore crushing Hezbollah and Assad, being subbed with Sharar. So to say that the Israelis are just, acting out whimsically, I think that'd be a bit too much. And our diplomacy is capitalizing on whatever the Israelis did. Now, granted, some days, they might make some calls that we wouldn't like and vice versa. But I wouldn't say that this, this suggests that there's a big gap between the policy. I think we agree on the policy, whether in Lebanon and Syria or in other places, but there might be a hit there, or a hit here that not everyone agrees on.
But do you worry, or are you concerned, or people who follow this, are they concerned that over time this could deteriorate the relationship between the Trump White House and the Netanyahu government, that if this sentiment is prevailing there that, Netanyahu is kind of some cowboy in the Wild West who bombs everything, who shoots from the hip and asks questions later. Do you worry that the relationship could break down?
Well, I think sometimes the chemistry between leaders plays a role, but I would like to think of our relationship with Israel as a strategic alliance. And these kinds of relationships usually go through multiple layers. We have our security establishment, intel establishment, that counsels the president on how to or when to run things. And I think the Israelis have the same thing. I wouldn't say that any prime minister in Israel would do whatever he wants to do without, of course, consulting first with the professionals, the military, the intelligence, everybody else around the table. So from time to time, there might be tension. From time to time, the chemistry is not right between two leaders of any two countries. But to say that this affects the strong alliance between the two countries, I think that'd be a step too far.
All right. Hussain Abdul-Hussain, thanks for bearing with us here. Always good to see you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.